Yes, good evening, students. So today we are going to discuss about the grade 10 science chapter number 8, that is characteristics of organisms. So in this, first of all, I would like to explain. Now here this characteristic of organism means like, there are two types of living, there are two types of organisms. Number one, you have the living organisms as well as the non-living organisms. Okay. So here we have to understand if you are categorizing, if you are differentiating living and non-living, there are some specific characteristics where we can differentiate a living from a non-living. Okay. So these are the things that we are going to explain today in this particular chapter. Right now, here this is a brief introduction, and you can just go through that. And here, these are the common characteristics of living organisms that can be listed. I mean, like you can see, the first point is cellular organization. So all the living organisms, they have a cellular organization. That means they have cells, tissues, and organs. Okay, cells, tissue. There's a cellular level organization. So we will be explaining each and everything in detail. The second characteristics of a living organism is nutrition. So for them to survive, they need nutrition. So they produce food, or else they take food from outside, and they absorb, I mean, they intake the relevant nutritional level to their body. So that is also a characteristic of living organisms. So the third one is respiration. So all the organisms who the living organisms, they respire, they breathe in, they breathe out. So they inhale oxygen and they exhale carbon dioxide. So this process is called as respiration, which is also a unique characteristic of living organisms. The next is irritability and coordination. Yes, so all the living organisms, they have a characteristic which is coordination, right? We can organize it as nervous coordination as well as hormonal coordination. So there is nervous coordination as well as hormonal coordination. We'll go in detail in the next session, right? So next is excretion, right? Excretion is also a particular characteristics of living organism. Next is movement. Thereafter you get reproduction, and the final characteristics growth and development. So these are the characteristics that can be different, that we can differentiate a living from a non-living. Okay, so these are the main characteristics. So you all have to have a thorough idea on what these are. So always, students, remember, these are things that you should not memorize. There's nothing to memorize here. So you are a living organism. So you just have to relate that with your own body, so that you will never forget these things. So for example, now when I'm explaining about the cellular organization, you just relate it to your own body, your own self, so that you will never forget this particular chapter. Okay, so let's go on to cellular organization. So you can see here, there are 4 images given in your textbook, and these are unicellular organisms. So as you all have already studied this, that organisms can be categorized into 2, unicellular and multicellular. Unicellular organisms means the organisms which are composed of one cell. Uni means one. Okay. So multicellular means organisms which are made up of more than one cells. Okay. So let's read this. When considering the structure of a unicellular organism, it is made up of the cytoplasm and organelles enclosed by a plasma membrane. This unicellular unit is an organism which shows living characteristic. When a water sample of a pond or hay extraction is observed using a microscope, unicellular organisms can be observed easily. So they're telling, a pond, that if you take a sample of water from a pond, right, and then you observe under the microscope. So a microscope is an equipment, is an instrument which is used to observe microorganisms. So the word micro means small. Okay, the word micro is small. So microscope is an instrument which is used to observe minute organisms. So here you can see we are going to observe the sample of water from a pond, so that we can see unicellular organism. You can see microorganisms. So you can see these 4 are unicellular organisms. So sometimes you can get these questions in the paper. In your MCQ, they can give you these images and they can tell you to identify this. Okay, or else they can tell you to identify unicellular from the multicellular. So you have to understand these: Chlamydomonas, Euglena, amoeba, paramecium. These are 4 examples for unicellular organisms. Clear? Right. So let's go to the next. In a unicellular organism, organelles level organization can be seen. The origin of a multicellular organism is from a single cell. The zygote, which is the product of the fertilization of an egg with a sperm. The below mentioned sketch is just to show the development of embryo of a human. Yes. Now, you know that all the multicellular organisms are formed from one unicellular organism. So, one unicellular organism will definitely multiply and it forms a multicellular organism. So, they have given you a diagrammatic explanation on how a human being is developed. So, now here in this, we showed that all these 4 are unicellular, but now here we are going to show you a multicellular formation, a multicellular organism, how it is formed. So you can see on top, this is the egg cell. So this one you would have studied in the chapter reproduction of your science syllabus. So you can see the female, the cell is the egg and the male part is the sperm. So this is a fertilization process where it takes place. So at the beginning, what happens? These two fertilize together and it forms an embryo, right? An embryo, inside the embryo, what happens? The embryo starts to divide and it forms the zygote. Okay. And finally, it forms the zygote with a multicellular organ. You can see here. Here it is only one cell and cell starts to multiply. And here it's multiplied and you can see a lot of cells in this. And this is a multicellular organism. So here you can see it's one cell. Here also it's one cell. So these two cells unite and forms the zygote. And thereafter, it forms a multicellular organism. So this is actually a part of reproduction. And you have to understand in this that a multicellular organism, the summary is a multicellular organism is formed by a combination of unicellular organisms, that orders multiplication of unicellular organisms, right? The bodies of multicellular organisms are composed of different types of cells. Those cells are important in different functions. Now, when you take what they are saying here is, if you take a multicellular organism, right? A multicellular organism is not made up of the same type of cell. They are made up of different types of cells. Okay, so different types of cells have different types of functions. Different functions. So they perform different functions. For example, they have shown you in diagram 8.3 transverse section, right? A transverse section of a plant leaf. Here you can see a transverse section of a plant leaf. Okay. In this, you can see that this is the top layer of a cell. The top cell layer is epidermal cell. Then you get the palisade cell, right? Then you have the xylem cell. Then you have the phloem cell. You all know that you all have studied this, that xylem is the cell that collection of xylem cells will form a tissue, xylem tissue. So this is the tissue which is responsible of transporting water in a plant, and phloem is responsible of transporting produced food in a plant. And here you can see root hair cells. So all this a plant is a multicellular organism which is composed of different types of cells. Okay, so this is what you have to understand. And even if you take a human body, there are different types of cells. Okay, you get the nervous cells in the nervous system, and then you get the bone cells in the skeletal system, and you get white blood cell, red blood cell. So these are in the blood, which is present in the blood, and you get skin cells, right? Then you get gamete cells, that is the male gamete is the sperm cell. So there are different types of cells present in human body. So what you have to understand here is a unicellular organism is made up of only one cell, okay? And a multicellular organism is made up of different types of cells, okay? Where they have more than two cells, okay? Two or more than two cells. A multicellular organism possesses a tissue and a system level organization. The organ of the organism are well developed and designed to carry out relevant function. Now what they say is, these multicellular organisms, they have a tissue and a system level organization. Okay, so what is a tissue? A tissue is a collection of cells. A collection of cells specialized to perform one function or many functions. Okay, that is the meaning of a tissue, right? So a tissue is a collection of cells which is specialized to perform one particular function or many functions, right? So here in multicellular organisms, you can see there are tissues as well as system. Now, as you all know, there are a lot of systems in a human body. You get the digestive system, which is specialized for digestion. You get the nervous system, which is specialized for nervous coordination. You get the bone skeletal system, which is help you all for movement and to give you all a structure. And you get the blood circulatory system, which helps to circulate blood, transportation of oxygen and other gases. And then you get the reproductive system, which is involved in reproduction, right? So there are a lot of systems in your body. So multicellular organisms are well specialized in the system level organization. So they have tissues and also they have system level organization, right? Here you have the smaller structural, and now they are giving you the definition for a cell. What is a cell? Okay. Now this question is oftenly asked in your O-level past papers, and you can see you have to know the definition of a cell. A cell is the smallest structural and the functional unit of a living organism. The smallest structural and the functional unit of a living organism. So you have to remember that. I repeat, the cell is the smallest structural and functional unit of an organism. A group of cells modified to perform a specific function is called a tissue. A group of cells modified to perform a specific function is called as a tissue. So these are the definitions they ask in your paper. You get these questions. So you can just simply, you can score 1 mark, right? If you know these definitions, you can score 1 mark. So you have to remember, don't memorize, but just, you just link it to something. You just create an image. Okay, a cell is the smallest structural and functional unit of all the living organisms, right? So a group of cells, so for example, I gave you an example where the sperm and the egg, they unite to form a zygote, and then within the zygote, the cells start to multiply and it forms a multicellular organism. So similarly, a group of cells together, it forms a tissue. So a group of cells together, they combine to form a tissue with a specialized function or many functions. A collection of tissues forms an organ. A collection of tissues forms an organ. A collection of organs forms a system. A collection of systems forms an organism. Now let's see. Here you can see in this example, right? On your right side of the book, you can see they have given an example. So the smallest unit is the cell. You can see heart muscle cells. Okay, heart muscle cells are here. This is the smallest unit of an organism. Okay, so then a collection, now these heart muscle cells gets collected together and it forms a heart muscle tissue. A heart muscle tissue, right? And then what happens? A heart muscle tissue collectively forms the heart, which is the organ, right? So cells collectively form a tissue, tissue collectively forms an organ, right? And a collection of organs forms a system. A collection of organs forms the system. A collection of systems forms an organism. So let's go to this flow chart. You can see a cell, collection of cells forms a tissue, collection of tissues forms an organ, collection of organs forms a system, and collection of multiple systems. For example, circulatory system, digestive system, nervous system, lymphatic system, skeletal system, reproductive system. All these systems together forms an organism. Understood? So this is what is said in this particular characteristic, which is cellular organization. Okay, so cellular organization, I explained you clearly, right? If you all have any doubts, you can mention in your comments in this video. So here you have the second part, that is the second character, which is nutrition. So as we all know, all the living organisms, they need some energy in order to work. For example, we'll see, now you can see my hand. If I want to move a finger of my hand, I need energy. Now I'm speaking. In order for me to speak, I need energy. So how you are going to get this energy? So you can get this energy only by food. Okay, by having food you get energy. So the ultimate need of a human being or any other living creature is food. So without food you cannot live. So let's see, this is how this character becomes unique for living organisms. The process by which the energy and the materials are obtained for the maintenance of the life is known as nutrition. So this is also the definition for nutrition. The process by which energy and the materials are obtained for the maintenance of the life. So you need energy in order to maintain your life, right? So this is obtained by nutrition. Energy is needed for the cell growth and to repair the worn out structures. So you know that cells, they also have a lifespan. They are formed and they perform their duty, and also the cells start to die and a new cells they generate. So this is how, in order for this cycle to move on, you need energy. So this is where the nutrition comes into play. So without nutrition you cannot get energy. Without energy you cannot survive. Okay, there won't be any cell growth and there won't be any new cell formation. So in that case you won't be able to survive. Okay, this energy is obtained by nutrition. The organisms that produce their own food or the nutrition by themselves are known as autotrophic. Right, I don't need to go in detail to this. So this is actually in your grade 11 syllabus you have on photosynthesis, right? So organisms that produce their own food. There are two types of organisms. One is autotrophic organisms. The other one is heterotrophic organisms. So organisms that produce their own food, you don't need to go out and take. So they produce their own food within their body. That is, these type of organisms are called as autotrophic organisms. So in the word you can understand auto means automatic. They produce their own food. So one type of organism is the green plants. So green plants produce their own food in the process of photosynthesis. That one in grade 11 you all have studied it clearly. Okay, so organisms that produce their own food are called as autotrophic, and the organisms that depend on autotrophic is called as heterotrophic. Now you know we are heterotrophic. We human beings, animals, we are heterotrophic, but plants are autotrophic. Okay, because why? We cannot produce our own food. If we want to have our nutrition, right, what do? We either take the plants or else we depend on another animal. So that means we have no ability to produce our own food. Okay, so these are the two categories, autotrophic as well as heterotrophic. So I repeat, organisms that produce their own food are called as autotrophic. Organisms that depend on autotrophic are called as heterotrophic. Okay, so here in this you can see that they have given you the equation for photosynthesis. Okay, they have given you the equation for photosynthesis. That is, carbon dioxide plus water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll will produce you glucose and oxygen. So in this you can see glucose is the main product, oxygen is the byproduct, right? Oxygen is the byproduct, and carbon dioxide and water are the raw materials. This is actually a chemical equation. This is a word equation and this is the chemical equation at the bottom. You can see, right? There are two types of equations. Sometimes in your paper they will tell you to write the word equation and they will tell you to write the chemical equation. So that is the reason they have given you both the equations here. This is the word equation. If they tell you to write the word equation, so this is the equation. If they tell you to write the chemical equation, this is the equation. Clear, students? So this is what you have to understand in this particular point. So this is an autotrophic reaction. This is in plants, how the plants, they produce their own food. Okay, you can see here. And the other things, how these are dependent, right? Now, as I told you, the plants here, they are autotrophic. All the others here are heterotrophic. This is a food web. We call this as a food web. Now you can see here, this is the plant, right? With the sunlight, you can see using the sunlight, the plants produce their own food. And there is, you know, a grasshopper here. This grasshopper is depending on these green plants. Okay, and this grasshopper is eaten by this heterotrophic frog, and this heterotrophic frog is eaten by the snake or the eagle, right? And the snake is eaten by this eagle. So that is how you can see how the food is moved, transferred, the energy, how it is transferred, how they depend from one another. So the ones which produce their own food are called as autotrophic. The ones which depend on autotrophic are called as heterotrophic. Right. This is the second characteristic of a living organism. Let's move on to the third, that is respiration. Okay. This will be the last character that I'm explaining for the part A of this chapter. So the next part will be in our next video. So here you can see respiration. All organisms need energy for their metabolism. What do you mean by metabolism? Their day-to-day activity, right? So you know, cells within your body, there are cells and organs functioning, right? They're all machines. So in order for a machine to function, they need energy. For example, we'll see a vehicle, or we'll take a computer. For that to switch, if we want to switch on a computer, right, we have to give them a source of energy. For example, electricity. That is the energy source for them to switch on. So similarly, all the organs within our body, they need a particular source of energy in order to do their day-to-day activity. So this here comes the respiration. They obtain this energy by breaking down the food inside the cell. And yes, so you know, the process by which the stored food is transformed to energy is known as respiration. So this is the definition for respiration. Let's see this. The process by which the stored food is transformed into energy inside the cells is known as cellular respiration. So actually here you can understand that this the glucose, right? The glucose is the form of energy that the cells use in order to perform their metabolic activities, right? So the definition for cellular respiration is where the food is broken down into where it produces energy. So that process is known as cellular respiration. So during cellular respiration, what happens is it can show. Now here you can see cellular respiration is a series of biochemical reaction. The respiration, which is an important characteristic of life, cannot be observed directly, but it can be observed using respiratory movement of organism. That is by inspiration, taking of oxygen, respiration, removal of carbon dioxide, the expiration. So respiration is a combination of two processes. Inspiration, that is where you take in oxygen, right? You breathe in. So we call this as cellular movement. So when you are breathing in, you can see that your chest expands, right? And it comes forward, front, right? And it goes up and front. That is how the chest movements. So we call these as respiratory movements. Okay. So inhalation and exhalation together is called as respiration. Inhalation means taking oxygen. Exhalation means giving out carbon dioxide. These two together forms respiration. So you have to understand that. So these activities are simple. You can read it and you can understand what these activities say, right? So students, this is all for the first video that we are going to explain. So what you have to understand here is that living organism, let me summarize it once again, that in order to differentiate the organisms, that is living from the non-living, these characteristics are being used. There are 9 to 10 characteristics here. Yeah, there are 8 characteristics here. Out of these 8 characteristics, right? These main characteristics are the characteristics that we use to differentiate living from the non-living. Understood? So if one of these characteristics are there, if at least one of these characteristics are there, we can categorize that organism as a living organism, right? So let me take this very good example. So when you take a virus, you know, earlier in the earlier stage, virus was considered as a non-living organism. Virus was considered as a non-living organism. But later they identified that virus has only one character out of these 8. Virus has only one characteristic out of these 8. What is that character? Reproduction. Okay. Virus can reproduce and it can produce multiple viruses. That also it can be done only within a host cell. That also can be done only within a host cell. A host cell means inside a living cell. So if a virus enters a living cell, it starts to multiply. If the virus is outside, it will not, nothing will happen. But once the virus enters a living cell, it starts to multiply. That is, for example, COVID, right? Coronavirus. You can see it's a virus, which is the most dangerous virus at present. So this particular virus, once it enters our body, what happens? It starts to multiply, because viruses multiply very drastically, right? So they multiply very faster. So once they enter our living cell, they start to multiply and they start to create a huge amount of disaster within the living organisms. So this is a good example that where I can consider, if any organism has minimum one of these features, we can categorize them as living organisms. So that is the difference between living and non-living organisms. Hope everything is clear. So the part 2 will be I'll be explaining in the next video.